Hi, my name is Rick Conrad, and this is another episode of Unmisinterpreting the Bible, this time looking at James chapter 2, verse 24, where he says, "You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone." Now, some people bring this verse out, and they'll kind of make it a contradiction to Romans 3:28, "For we hold that one is justified by faith apart from works of the law." Now, that sure looks like a contradiction. I mean, James is here saying that you're not justified by faith alone, but works are involved also. Paul says that you're justified by faith and there's no works involved. So it seems pretty clear that they're saying different things. But if you tell me, well, you just pulled those verses out of context and made it look like a contradiction, that's a good reflex. Because, of course, words have different meanings depending on the context that we find them in. And the thing we'll find out here is when James says justified and when Paul says justified, justified has more than one meaning. And in this case, these two apostles are not talking about the same kind of justified. And then when you change the meaning of justified, suddenly they're not even talking about the same thing. So there's no contradiction involved. So in order to see that, and not just take my word for it, let's start by looking over at the context of Romans 3:28. There's the verse we started with there. One is justified by faith apart from works of the law. And as we follow him down in here into chapter 4, we'll see a little more clearly what he's talking about. Right? First he's talking about whether Abraham was justified by works or the alternative. Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. Right there. That's what Paul means when he says justified. He's talking about a point in time where a person becomes righteous in the sight of God, where God counts a person to be righteous. And Paul is going to go on and make it very clear that this is not about works, right? The one who does not work, but instead believes, right? We had Abraham believed God, and God justifies the ungodly, not the deserving, but the ungodly. There's faith, and it results in being counted righteous, justification. Again, God counts people righteous, justifies them apart from their works. So, if that's Paul's definition of justified in Romans 3:28 and throughout most of the book, what else could justified mean other than being counted righteous in the sight of God? Well, we can actually look over here at another place in Romans where Paul uses the word in a different way. Right? Here he's saying that you may be justified, there it is, in your words and prevail when you are judged. Funny thing here, you is God. Now, we couldn't say that at any point in time God became righteous in the sight of God, or God was counted righteous apart from his works. No, that's not what justified means here. In this case, justified has to do with proving or showing something, right? God's words were always just and right and true, but in this case, we're talking about a demonstration of that and having the thing be proved in the sight of all. So there's an alternate definition of justification. It is to prove something or show it or give a reason for it. Okay, if you have to justify your work in math class, it's not enough to just put the right answer, but you have to show how you got there to prove that you understand the theory. So, with that in mind, what definition is James going to be using? Here's James chapter 2, starting in verse 14. And he says, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works?" Says, important word. Can that faith save him? We don't even know. Like, what kind of faith are we talking about? This guy just says he has faith. James isn't even saying that he really has anything that we could properly call faith. And then he gives an example. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them anything, what good is that? Right? Saying it don't make it so. If you say be warm, that doesn't make the person warm. And just because you say you have faith, that doesn't necessarily prove that you have faith. And so this faith by itself, right, it's just a faith that somebody says they have, but there's nothing to show it, right? That faith is dead, okay? Now, Paul wasn't talking about being justified by dead faith. I'm pretty sure that's not what he meant. Moving on. Someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from works, and I will show you my faith by my works, right? Show, that word is very important because that's where the context in which James is using this word justification. You remember we said that one of the definitions to justify yourself is to show that you were right. So show me your faith apart from your works. I will show you my faith by my works. First attempt. You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. So you can't show your faith by doctrinal purity, right? You know the right answers. You can, pass the theology quiz. That's not showing that you have faith. The demons can pass the theology quiz too, and then they don't have faith. So, do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works, and the scripture was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Isn't that great that Paul and James both cite the exact same verse? So we can compare the way that they're using it and see if it fits together or if it's contradictory. And in order to really understand this, we need to step back and remember our history of Genesis here. Now this verse that we're looking at, Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness, this is Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. This is referring to when God took Abraham out at night, told him to count the stars, he couldn't do it, and God said to him, that's how many descendants you're going to have. And Abraham still doesn't have his son. And Abraham believed God. So he was given a promise. He believed that. God counted that to him as righteousness. Now, the sacrifice of Isaac, which James makes reference to, that's Genesis chapter 22. So how come James makes a reference to chapter 22 and then cites chapter 15? Well, look exactly what he's saying here. He's saying that Abraham's faith was completed by his works. And he justified his faith when he offered up Isaac on the altar. So he was, James is in agreement here, counted righteous in chapter 15. What happened in chapter 22 is that he proved that. He showed it in a way that everybody could see that Abraham trusted in God. Because when God said, take your son up the mountain and offer him as a sacrifice, Abraham obeyed God and did exactly what he said. So we now can see that Abraham showed his faith by the way that he trusted in God. Abraham justified his claim to be a man of faith. Abraham lived a life that justified the faith that he had in God. And so that is the context in which we say that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone, not saying that you become righteous through your works, but that you show that you actually do have faith, show that your life actually has changed because of your faith in God. And it's fair to say that if someone claims to have faith, claims to be a Christian, but their life doesn't show it, and they don't seem to be trusting God in any way, right? That's where Jesus' words come in. You'll know them by their fruit. So, the verse we started with was, you see the person is justified by works and not by faith alone. If somebody brings this up to say that the way we become righteous is by both believing in Jesus and by doing good deeds, that's a misuse of this verse. Because that's not what James is talking about when he said justified. But James is talking about how do you show that this has already happened, that you have already placed your faith in God and your life is changed as a result. So that is James 2:24. Thanks for watching and hope to catch you on the next one.